Hey there, it's Kenzie from Details to Enjoy, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made the kits from our November and December vignette box. First, I decided what color I wanted to paint everything, and then I separated everything into groups based on the color I was going to paint them. I'm going to be starting with the white, which is Silky White by Behr. I'm going to be using a foam brush to paint just the tops of my letters and flower pieces, and the key to not getting the paint on the sides of your pieces is to not have very much paint on your brush. You want to make sure that you're letting the paint soak into the sponge instead of having a lot of paint sitting on the surface of your brush, and then you just want to lightly brush that over the surface of your letter. If you do get any paint on the sides, you can always wipe it off with your finger or an alcohol wipe. Once that is fully dry, I'm going to go ahead and do a second coat. Typically, white paint will take 2 to 4 coats. One thing to keep in mind though is that when you do the sanding stage later on, it can smooth out the finish. So if you feel like you have pretty decent coverage after a couple of coats and you want to sand and test how that's going to look, you can definitely do that, and you can always add a third coat if you think you need it after you sand. For the insert, I'm going to be doing our color wash method, so I'll need a cup of water and a sponge, and the first thing I need to do is rehydrate my sponge in the water until it is nice and soft. Then using the sponge, I'm going to get a few drops of water and add that to the paint on my tray, and then mix in the water with the sponge. There's not an exact science to how much water you will need to add, so you'll just need to play with the method until you're happy with the finish that you're getting. After I have the paint mixed with the water, I'm going to use the sponge in a swirling motion on my insert to add the paint to the insert. The goal of this method is to see the texture of the MDF through the paint, so by adding water, we're making the paint slightly transparent so that we can see the texture. Next, we're going to be using the color Autumn Ridge by Glidden for a few of our flower pieces. I'm using a clean foam brush, and again, you want to make sure that you have very little paint on your brush as you're painting these pieces. Add a second coat if needed. For the large piece of my floral and the insert for my bee kit, I'm going to be using the color Russian Olive by Behr. When you're painting inserts, you can have a little bit more paint on your brush. You just want to make sure that you're not getting any ridges in your paint and you don't have any paint pooling up. Once I painted my floral piece, I needed to remove the excess paint from the engraved lines, so I'm just sliding a tack through the lines to remove that paint. Then my insert was dry and I was ready to move on to a second coat. I ended up doing 3 full coats with this color. For the pine cone and branch, I'm using BB Frosh dark wax and a wax cloth. While you can get a similar look using the color wash method with a brown paint, we love having a jar of the dark wax on hand because it really just quickly and easily gives us that wood look on the pieces. To use the wax with a wax cloth, you're going to get a little bit of the product on a corner of the wax cloth and then rub that into your piece. Then once you have applied the wax, you need to wax on and wax off, so you're going to use a clean part of the rag to remove any of the excess. You want to make sure that your rag is gliding smoothly across the piece and that it's not feeling tacky anymore. I just repeated those same steps for my little branch piece. Once everything is painted and dried, I can move on to the sanding step that I mentioned earlier. So I'm just using a sanding block, and I'm going to do 2 different types of sanding on my pieces. One is the smoothing sand, and this is where I use the sanding block flat against the top of the piece, and the other is the distressing sand, where I use the sanding block at about a 45-degree angle to add a little bit of distressing to the edges of my pieces. I'm going to give every piece a quick sand, making sure that when I switch colors, I switch sanding blocks so I don't cross-contaminate any of the colors. If you don't want to have a distressed look, you don't need to do the distressing sand, but we do recommend doing the smoothing sand to help even out your finish. Once everything was sanded, I used a clean dry rag to remove any of the excess dust. The dry rag didn't remove all of the excess dust from my green insert, so I'm going in with a very slightly damp paper towel to remove that excess dust and bring back the richness and color. Next, I'm going to be assembling my kits, so first I'm starting off by placing the templates in the center of each kit. I'm using a ruler to make sure that it is centered, and then I'm going to use some washi tape to hold it in place. When placing the template on your A insert, keep in mind that the A inserts are not exactly square, they should be wider than they are tall. Once my templates are in place, I can start to adhere my pieces using the peel and stick adhesive backing. So I'm just removing the protective layer, and then I can place my piece in the template and push it down to make sure it's nice and secure. Then I'm going to repeat that process with the other pieces of my floral, fitting them into the template like a puzzle. If you're unsure about the placement, you can always put everything into place without the adhesive before you start to stick things down. Place the large flower on top of the green piece, matching the petals up with the shape below it. I'm going to use the same peel and stick method for all of the letters as well. There is a tiny bit of wiggle room in the template, so just try to make sure that you're placing your letters as straight as possible. Once everything has been attached, I'm going to press it all down in place just to make sure that it's stuck, and then I can start to remove my templates. If you do get any letters that catch on the template, just push the template back down, try to adjust the letters slightly, and then pull the template back up. Now my kits are done and ready to display in the pocket frames. If you make your own versions of these kits, we would love to see them. Tag us in social media. We're at Details to Enjoy on Instagram and Facebook.